First episode, we're going to talk about fuel, and I'm not going to go into a deep dive on everything, but this is just a quick overview on why fuel prices are going up and why that's affecting cost of grocery on the shelves. I'd like to come down here and start this one off just because all of these big yellow structures here will be shipped up to Fife and used in the offshore wind farm up there. Not exactly related to what I'm going to talk about today, but just to get you in a bit of that sustainability mindset. So I want to do some quick logistics economics here, address the link between increasing fuel prices and cost of living. Won't be too into detail, and this is more based on trucking costs, so let's not worry about that. If you want to hear more, I can talk to you all day about other modes and other ways of calculating fleet costs and those sort of things. But as a simple way of looking at it, in 2016, roughly 20% of costs for haulage were in fuel. In 2026, that number is now up about 33%. And we've seen a 78% increase in the price of fuel over the last 10 years. Now, this has been driven by, international conflict, particularly in the Middle East. We've got international sustainability policies and localized sustainability policies. Switching to renewable energies, there's been a lot of market manipulation and control with the access to oil and fuel. There's been growing profit margins in businesses that operate in that sort of space. So there's a whole lot of reasons that have resulted in this increase. But either way, it shows that a lot of companies are exposed to these changes and don't have much control over them. These effects have basically meant that total cost of transport has increased 21% directly attributed by fuel, which you can sort of say is 21% of the total cost that has changed over the last 10 years is also attributable to fuel. So I think everyone's now aware of this crisis that's going on with cost of living, and businesses and governments are also aware of that. The interesting part is a lot of renewable technology and the argument debate around it has always been steeped in the broader climate change discussion, but I think now businesses are realising that their fuel strategy needs to be built to mitigate cost pressures and geopolitical risks. It's not necessarily just about being greener and climate change and sustainability in that part. So if we kind of think that in the next 10 years, if it played out the same as the previous 10 years, leading businesses will be developing a strategy that will allow them to mitigate that 20% increase in their cost. So this will result in improved sales and market capture due to lower costs implemented and able to sell at a lower price. But there also ends up that additional business benefit in being green and sustainable. So kind of brings me to what I was talking about earlier in one of my first videos about, one of the first earlier ones in this post about the yellow structures down at the port. So investment in green infrastructure such as the offshore and onshore wind farms in Scotland up here helps to mitigate the future risk to cost increases due to geopolitical tension stemming from oil and fuel. Industry leaders are getting involved. You can see electric vans and smaller trucks are being common for high density, low kilometre operations, but long haul movements are restricted due to the charging time and horsepower for heavier loads. Hydrogen vehicles are another investment piece, but require a broader infrastructure discussion around access on roads. But one of my favourite sort of bits of technology is the biofuel space. So if you look at Martin Brower, who are the logistics business for McDonald's, they collect all the used canola oil, used cooking oil from their restaurants to return back to be processed and converted into energy for their own vehicles. I don't think there's necessarily a one-stop solution to all of this. I think there's a combination of those kind of parts that I've just mentioned where it'll become an overall strategy around it works. So you might end up having your electric vehicles doing your last mile, where fast charging and battery swapping will support that sort of part. You could have hydrogen vehicles completing sort of the middle mile, and then if you have a bespoke food or waste business that can operate in biofuel, that might support their network with return logistics. But fundamentally, and I try not to talk about this too much because it's a whole other video, the whole long haul network and the whole spine of the whole thing essentially should just run on trains. And I always like to sort of say that there's a bit of a running joke here that everything in logistics about optimization just ends up with using more trains. Anyway, this one's sort of been a bit detailed and heavy. I've missed a lot on this, so if anyone does want to reach in touch and talk about sustainability strategies or renewable fuel, or if you're just kind of interested in what you could be doing a bit more as a consumer around this space, just happy to jump on and have a chat.